Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Views of an Outsider, The Outsider's View from May 31st. If you want to keep up with everything that's going on in the world, but you don't want to drag down your entire life by listening to the news every day, then get the main stories right here once a week and spend the rest of your time actually living your best life. Let's get right into it. Last Saturday, gunshots erupted just steps away from the White House when a suspect opened fire on the Secret Service at a checkpoint, which rightfully led to those agents returning fire, hitting the suspect who later died at the hospital. Afterwards, the New York Post reported that the latest shooter was 21-year-old Nasir Best. Best only got off a few shots with his revolver before he was quickly shot and killed in a hail of bullets that was returned by the federal officers that were under fire. Authorities have not confirmed a motive here, but the New York Post cited sources that claimed that Best was very much believed to have been severely mentally troubled, so much so that he even allegedly claimed to be Jesus Christ. And if we had involuntary commitment right now, he would still be alive. But that is the result of toxic compassion for you. Best was already known to the Secret Service, and those sources also said that Best had previously violated a court order that required him to stay away from the White House. One bystander was hit during this shooting, but investigators said that it was unclear whether that person was hit by the suspect or during the subsequent exchange of gunfire. A dramatic video at the time showed Secret Service agents shouting at the numerous reporters who were gathered on the north lawn of the White House to evacuate their filming positions, and they were rushed inside to the briefing room for their own safety. The Secret Service said that none of their officers were injured during this shooting, thankfully, and they also confirmed that President Trump was at the White House during the incident, but they noted that he was not ever in any immediate danger. The same, unfortunately, cannot be said for other people. The heroic Army veteran that has unfortunately been pulled into the center of a nasty controversy thanks to Maine's disgusting candidate for Senate, Graham Plattner, decided to speak out, saying that the Democrats that are still backing Plattner after all that he has done owe his children an explanation for that decision. Just to briefly recap, because there is far too much sewage from this man to wade through all of it. Graham Plattner has a Nazi SS tattoo all over his chest. He said that women who get date raped deserve it. He called Mary, the mother of Christ, a skank, and he called Jesus himself a zombie. And now he has stated online that a Purple Heart recipient deserved to die, as Plattner also bemoaned the Taliban's poor aim in not successfully killing this hero. The fact that Democrats continue to back someone that is this disgusting defies any explanation. It is so extreme that you have to wonder if the right isn't paying them to put forward a candidate like this. But no, we all know that this has become the precise quality of bedfellows that Democrats want to lie down with, to put it in polite terms. According to the New York Post, the Purple Heart recipient in question, Ted Daniels, blasted the top Democrats that are continuing to support Plattner after all of this, especially given his Reddit comments that resurfaced recently, in which Plattner was mocking Mr. Daniels specifically. Then he said that Mr. Daniels didn't deserve to live through the brutal firefight in Afghanistan that nearly took his life. Mr. Daniels' helmet cam footage from that ambush by the Taliban in 2012 went viral years ago. It showed him sprinting into action to open fire during a Taliban ambush while bullets flew all around him. Mr. Daniels' team survived that onslaught, but not before Mr. Daniels, who drew the enemy fire away from his comrades, was hit 4 times in an act of heroism that earned him a Purple Heart in honor of his selfless willingness to lay down his life for others. Plattner only responded to that by mocking Mr. Daniels on a cowardly burner account on Loserland Reddit, where he called Mr. Daniels a dumb mother effer and said that he should not have survived, while expressing his regret that the Taliban didn't have better aim. The New York Post has reported that Plattner has since deleted large portions of that account history. As for Mr. Daniels, he told the Post that he doesn't even want an apology from Plattner at this point because it wouldn't be genuine. Knowing an irredeemable lost cause when he sees one, Mr. Daniels' focus was elsewhere. Instead of an apology, Mr. Daniels says that he wants the so-called liberal lawmakers like Elizabeth Warren, Chuck Schumer, Bernie Sanders, and Hakeem Jeffries, who have all endorsed Plattner and continue to do so, to explain to his children why they are backing a candidate who mocked the idea of their father being killed in combat and openly wished that things had turned out differently. And Mr. Daniels pointed out that he was not only defending himself with this demand, he also criticized Plattner for his comments targeting the military service of Chris Kyle and Vice President J.D. Vance, which we will circle back around to later, saying, "I don't understand the hatred towards veterans who served honorably. That part gets me." Yeah, it gets a lot of people, given that our honoring attitude towards our veterans, like expressions of patriotism for our country, were once issues that both Democrats and conservatives wholeheartedly agreed on. But not anymore. As for Plattner, as per usual, he refused to step up like a man and instead defended himself by pointing to his own military service in order to get some free mileage out of it and earn himself a get-out-of-jail-free card when it comes to attacking other veterans in this vile way. Then he pulled the classic woke card, where the aggressor claims victimhood, saying that any accusations that he disrespects veterans when he publicly posts that he wished that those veterans had been killed in battle are accusations that he finds offensive and slanderous, although not as offensive as anyone with half of a moral compass finds him and his entire existence. Plattner has not apologized for his own comments. Despite everything, Mr. Daniels was clear that he is not attacking Plattner's military record, and in that sense, he still considers him a brother because of his service. But that does not mean that he should not be held accountable for the endless list of vile things that he has freely chosen to post. Mr. Daniels also pointed out that it is a lot easier and requires no integrity or courage to trash someone online as opposed to saying these kinds of vile things to someone's face. Mr. Daniels correctly stated, "I received a Purple Heart for my injuries, but Mr. Plattner cheered for my death from behind a keyboard." Mr. Daniels also wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal on Thursday, where he deservedly ripped into Plattner, writing, "The tough-talking Marine veteran struts around in Carhartt jackets and jeans. He also plays up his job as an oyster farmer, but the only client mentioned in his federal financial disclosure was the restaurant his mother owns." Mr. Daniels wrote on, comparing Plattner to Tim Walz on steroids, saying, "I couldn't care less about the comments he made about me, but they are a reflection of his character." And he pointed out that Plattner has used his keyboard to trash talk the Navy SEAL hero, Chris Kyle, as well, in addition to doing the same with the Vice President, J.D. Vance, who also served as a Marine, openly saying, "I never thought I'd see the day when Democrats would even consider backing a candidate like this." None of us did. It will be interesting to see what happens as a result of that choice, because that disgusting choice will be voted on by ordinary Democrats in 2 weeks when their primary takes place. And then the winner of the Democrat nomination will face all of the voters, and they will choose between whoever the Democrats put forward and the incumbent Republican Senator Susan Collins, who noted that veterans from all across the United States, outraged with Plattner, have been flooding her office to voice their disgust. This issue is a personal one for Miss Collins as well. Her own father was a veteran of World War II who earned 2 Purple Hearts at the Battle of the Bulge, where he was wounded right after turning 19 years old. She told reporters, "You have Graham Plattner using profanity and saying that this wounded soldier doesn't deserve to live. These are men and women who are risking their lives for our country. For him to ridicule this soldier, saying that he doesn't deserve to live, is just appalling." Plattner tried to pivot the attention away from him and back to Ms. Collins, dodging the issue with accusations that she had sent him to war with her vote in 2002, which authorized military action in Iraq. But Ms. Collins nuked that little distraction tactic by pointing out that, unlike in the Vietnam era, Plattner was not drafted. He voluntarily enlisted 2 times, well after the war had already begun. And then, after that, he chose to cash in on his military training by voluntarily working for the controversial mercenary firm Blackwater. Despite his truly appalling representation of just how disgusting a human being can be, Plattner is expected to cruise to victory within his party on June 9th, given that his main opponent in that race, the Democrat Governor Janet Mills, has suspended her campaign. Elsewhere, Americans were celebrating our fallen veterans as we do every Memorial Day. Then on Monday, the official X account for the DNC found itself being widely condemned after it shamefully prioritized attacking President Trump over honoring our fallen heroes in their Memorial Day post. They posted an image of 13 fallen U.S. service members with the caption, "Today, we honor the American heroes who made the ultimate sacrifice in Trump's war with Iran." Their post was received very poorly online, where commenters called it incredibly distasteful and politically motivated in a very unflattering way. Things got so bad that only hours after it was published, the post was deleted. The Democrat Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois, a veteran of the Iraq War, commented by posting, "It is incredibly distasteful to use our heroic dead for a political attack on Memorial Day. I'm a Democrat and I condemn this post by the DNC." Arizona's Republican candidate for Congress, the former NFL kicker Jay Feely, agreed, writing, "Politicizing the sacrifice of American soldiers on Memorial Day? Absolutely disgraceful. Despicable post from the Democrats. The middle seemed to agree with both sides. One person on X named Tally Goldschift said that the post was disgusting regardless of one's political views, writing, "This isn't just an infuriatingly bad post. It's deeply unsettling. Republicans have a name for it, TDS. We can stand up against his problematic policies, and we should. Using American soldiers' deaths to score points against Trump on Memorial Day, though? Who approved this?" That is the question that Democrats are perpetually prompting among the real people out here who don't live online. The DNC's X account now has a different Memorial Day post, which reads, "This Memorial Day, we remember and honor those who have made the ultimate sacrifice to protect our country and defend our freedoms." Now, why couldn't you just have posted that from the start? Every time your mask slips, people are a little more appalled, and they like you a lot less. 2 words: unforced errors. Way too many of them. Speaking of which, the leftist mayor of Minneapolis, you remember him, Jacob Frey, also triggered a massive wave of true fury online Monday morning when he used a day that is set aside for honoring America's fallen military members to instead memorialize George Floyd. Again, Memorial Day is set aside for the memory of a specific group, and that group would be heroic, which George Floyd most definitely was not, military members, which George Floyd certainly was not, who died in service to their country, which George Floyd most definitely did not. Nevertheless, while completely ignoring the brave men and women who did make that ultimate sacrifice for American freedom, Frey used that day to post, quote, "Today we remember George Floyd, who was murdered by a former Minneapolis police officer 6 years ago." Then the out-of-touch and very sick leftist mayor droned on and on about painful truths, policing, and global significance as he reduced this very meaningful federal holiday to a taxpayer-funded advertisement for his city's Black Lives Matter re-education camp. The backlash to this was both instant, fierce, and could not have been more fully deserved. Critics quickly reminded this disgusting soy boy mayor that Memorial Day belongs to heroes, not to a career criminal with a lengthy rap sheet of victimizing other people, a rap sheet that included an aggravated robbery from 2007 during which the saintly George Floyd pointed a gun at the belly of a pregnant woman. The former United States Air Force pilot, Buzz Patterson, blasted Frey, posting a true reality check that read, "Memorial Day is sacred ground for honoring American heroes who gave their lives for this country, not thugs." Clown Mayor Jacob Frey hijacks it to worship George Floyd, a violent career criminal, armed robber, fentanyl-filled junkie who overdosed while fighting cops. This gutless mayor just spat in the face of every fallen soldier and their grieving families. The investigative reporter, Sarah Fields, condemned Fry's woke pandering as well, posting this shot. You remember a guy who died of an overdose, who pointed a gun at a pregnant woman. I remember my best friend who was sniped through the head during the last month of her deployment. This is why we will never find common ground. The commentator Matt Van Swol had some very deserved choice words for Fry, calling him a vile piece of shit and demanding, "What is wrong with you?" On top of all of that, the cold hard facts about George Floyd have gone mainstream with time, despite the left's attempts to sanitize them. While Derek Chauvin was convicted in the death of George Floyd, the jury itself admitted that they were looking for any way to convict him of something because they were fearful of the media-manipulated mob outside. And so they convicted a cop of murder for, according to them, not doing enough to revive him, which is not the same thing. But that's what they went with after the autopsy revealed that George Floyd had zero damage to his neck or to his trachea, while also documenting that this multi-convicted felon with a heart problem was packed to the gills with lethal levels of fentanyl. And tape shows that he was already screaming, "I can't breathe," from the fentanyl, while resisting arrest when he was inside the police cruiser, well before he was put on the ground to control his fighting. Media lies about that situation, promoted by Fry and other manipulative politicians, turned Floyd's death into pure propaganda that was used by agitators to launch an entire summer of nationwide anarchist riots, the most expensive riots in our entire history as a country. Historic riots in which several people needlessly lost their lives. The resulting BLM circus completely leveled parts of Minneapolis, and it left a trail of destroyed property and destroyed race relations all across America. At least 15 people were killed. Thousands of businesses, many of them being minority-owned, were looted and torched, and insurance companies were left on the hook for $2 billion in damage, raising the premiums for all and leaving cities scarred for a generation, all of which Fry stupidly tried to revive on Memorial Day of all days. Quickly realizing that he had stepped into a PR meat grinder instead of signaling to a now non-existent crowd, a panicked Fry tried to pull a desperate U-turn. 2.5 hours after he made this entirely unforced era by mooning the country, Fry then threw up a last-minute afterthought tribute to the military by acknowledging that we owe our service members our deepest gratitude. How big of you. I know how much that must have hurt you to acknowledge. Now circling back around to similar ilk in another Democrat that we already covered. The widow of the American hero, Chris Kyle, ripped into Maine's candidate for Congress, Graham Plattner, after he disparaged her dead husband. Last Sunday, Taya Kyle told Fox News that Plattner was cowardly for lying about her late husband and accused that Democrat of using a cheap political trick to distract from his own long string of genuinely awful, character-revealing history. Here's what happened. A podcast episode from 2024 resurfaced in which Plattner suggested that Mr. Kyle, the deadliest sniper in the entire history of the United States military, intentionally killed civilians to inflate his kill count. He did this with no evidence of any kind. A much better man than the one sullying him, Mr. Kyle was murdered in 2013 by a veteran that he was trying to help who was suffering from severe PTSD. His widow said of Plattner, "To me, nothing says I want attention more than disparaging a national hero who's also dead. It's transparent, it's cowardly, it's lowbrow to lie about somebody else, and it distracts from, I think, some things that he has said. It's this cheap political trick to say, I haven't done a whole lot, so let me attach my name to somebody who's beloved, and if nothing else, I'll get out in the news." And that's working for him to get that notoriety. But to me, it shows a total inability to lead with character. So for me, he would be out of the running immediately. My kids are 21 and 20. They're grown adults, and I wish I could tell you that it doesn't hurt, but it does. I can't imagine anyone voting for someone like that. Taya added that based on the remarks he made, that it was obvious to her entire family that Plattner did not really know her late husband, and that he made his disparaging remarks against someone who was dead and therefore couldn't even defend himself against these attacks just to get clickbait attention. Robert O'Neill, the Navy SEAL who killed Osama bin Laden, recently spoke up about Plattner's comments too, saying that would just stem from jealousy. Maybe because Chris Kyle's name became famous for a whole bunch of confirmed kills. The jealousy is there. I've seen the jealousy too, but professional jealousy stuff like this is really, really rare between veterans, which jealousy is a fair claim, given that Plattner has gone after this famous hero, as well as a Purple Heart recipient, as we already covered, and even Jesus for some reason. Inferiority complex much, Nazi? By the way, I love how the left calls everyone a Nazi, while they actually run one with an SS tattoo across his chest. I guess irony is lost on the unintelligent. We know for sure that hypocrisy doesn't bother them one bit. But let's turn the conversation to better people. A Gold Star widow made a beautiful request for Memorial Day, one that sparked an outpouring of support from Americans. The day before the holiday that would honor the fallen took place, Cheryl Ann Shaw posted a Sunday message on X asking whether anyone that would be visiting Arlington National Cemetery the next day could stop by her late husband's grave while they were there and share a photo of it with her, writing to the country that owes her and her husband so much. This is probably a long shot, but if anybody happens to be in D.C. this weekend and plans on visiting Arlington, I would love to see a fresh photo of my husband's grave in Section 60. She went on to add that her husband was Staff Sergeant Alan W. Shaw, listing his cavalry division and saying that he had been killed in action in Iraq on February 9th, 2007. Immediately, the responses started flooding in, with many people promising to make a point of visiting his grave, or, when that was not possible, promising to specifically honor Mr. Shaw's sacrifice on Memorial Day as they celebrated. Several Americans made good on those promises, too, including the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, who is herself a veteran. All of these people shared photos of themselves visiting this hero's grave at Arlington. Miss Gabbard wrote, "It was an honor to visit your husband's grave today on your behalf and to pay my respects. Our nation owes a debt of gratitude to those who made the ultimate sacrifice and to the loved ones they left behind. Thank you for your service and sacrifice." Mrs. Shaw responded by thanking Miss Gabbard for taking the time to honor her husband in this touching way, writing, "Seeing you standing there at his grave honestly brought me to tears. Thank you for honoring Alan, for saying his name, and for reminding me that there are still people in this country who have not forgotten the cost of freedom." Oh, there are lots of us, ma'am. Mrs. Shaw also reflected on the viral response that she had so unexpectedly generated, the outpouring of support that was expressed by everyone who honored her request. And there were many, posting, "Last night I made a simple request on X asking if anybody visiting Arlington National Cemetery for Memorial Day would stop by Alan's grave and leave a photo for our family. What happened next honestly caught me off guard. By this afternoon, dozens of Americans from all walks of life had made the walk to Section 60 to visit Staff Sergeant Alan W. Shaw. Veterans, families, complete strangers, people who had never met Alan, but chose to honor him anyway. For one day on social media, people put aside the constant noise and negativity and came together for something bigger than themselves. My notifications filled with photos, kind messages, prayers, and stories from people honoring not just Alan, but so many of our fallen heroes. I don't think people fully understand what moments like this mean to Gold Star families. In a separate Memorial Day post, Mrs. Shaw also shared what this holiday means to those Gold Star families, writing, "Memorial Day will always mean more to our family than cookouts or a long weekend. It's the sound of boots on concrete, the weight of a folded flag in shaking hands, 3 children growing up with memories instead of a father." But over the years, I've also realized something else. The men we honor today did not give everything so America would sit in mourning forever. They believed in life, in freedom, in family, in backyard barbecues, ball games, loud laughter, and the simple privilege of being home. So yes, remember them. Speak their names. Teach your children who they were. Fly the flag. Visit the cemetery. And then live. Amen. It is for freedom that you have been made free. That was not the only worthwhile message online this week. But before we get into that, I would like to frame this story with a modified Star Wars quote. Yoda once told Luke Skywalker, "Do or do not. There is no try." For the purpose of today's discussion, I would like to amend that to do or do not. There is no should. Now, by that, I am not claiming that morality doesn't exist, as in you should treat other people the way that you want to be treated. Of course, that is true. I am talking about should, as in the world should be this way, even though it is not. Humans should be wired like this, even though they are not. That kind of should doesn't exist. Being focused on whether or not things should be a certain way keeps you from ever getting to the part where you realize that because it's not the way that you think it should be, you have a choice to make. And that choice will be defined by reality, not by should. And no one can change that for you. That is why that realization is important. So no matter which side of the should aisle you come down on when it comes to this issue, just try to set that aside as the non-existent moot point that it is. And for once, look at what is as opposed to what you believe should be. Because that is what affects actual outcomes in a way that should simply does not. Making decisions based off of is instead of should is the only way that you will be able to live with the actual outcomes that you choose. Because if you choose them based off of should, you choose them based off of a reality that doesn't actually exist. With that said, we all know that Hollywood, feminist culture, and the media routinely try to deny a hard truth that was confirmed by a very unlikely source this week, an OnlyFans girl. One of the women who tragically commoditizes her body and sells it on the, sadly, popular porn site, finally told the truth in a video admitting that no high-value man will ever date an OnlyFans girl, a reality that she was fed lies about based off of should in a cruel act that leaves girls like her desperate, lonely, trapped, and crippled with anxiety. This brave post from Athena Paris, who has well over 1 million followers on social media, opened with a clip of the late Charlie Kirk explaining that men look so lowly on OnlyFans girls, to which Miss Paris added, "It's so true. As someone being in the OnlyFans industry for the last 3 years, I truly think that it's a give and exchange." She went on to point out that when you make a deal with the dark side, you might gain financial freedom, but in exchange, your love life suffers greatly. Ms. Paris said that she's been single for 4 years and admitted that she has never had one boyfriend while doing OnlyFans. Now, maybe that's not important to you, but I would point out that most people do not want to be alone. And no person is wired to be alone. We are a communal species. Next, you might argue that a man who would care about a woman being on OnlyFans is not a good man. In the same way that a woman who wants a man to be employed is not a good woman. Everyone has standards. You have them for others, and others have them for you. And no one wants to bring a porn star home to their mother. That is what is. Should does not exist. No one wants the mother of their future children to be someone in eternal internet porn videos that are going to get pulled up by cruel children to torment their kids later on. A man is not a bad person for thinking about those things just because you haven't thought about them, any more than a woman is a bad person for thinking about what kind of man contributes positive things to her life and what will only create more problems for her that she doesn't need to voluntarily create for herself. Ms. Paris said that men will sleep with her, but no one will go so far as to claim her as their girlfriend. She went on to admit that she has experienced true darkness since she started selling her body on this exploitative website. I say exploitative because it takes advantage of damaged women, feeds them lies about what this is going to do to their life, and then makes money off of that. And then she detailed the horrifying sexual abuse that she has suffered from men. In one instance, she says that she was actually raped. Warning, the darkness that you open yourself up to when you do something like this, it comes in depression and anxiety and isolation. It's all spiritual. Every high-value man that I have ever met, he has told me that he will never claim me. They will hook up with you. They will never claim you. They will never bring you home to their parents. I do agree that high-value men will look low on a woman who does OnlyFans. It makes you believe that you are an extremely low-value person and that you are not capable of loving because of the career choice that you have made. Over the past few weeks, Ms. Paris has posted several videos on social media about how she has started to read the Bible. In one video, she said that she was abused as a child and strongly believes that empty and easily exploited girls get into this industry because they are looking for self-worth, something that is historically, statistically true of women involved in pornography. And it's just ironic that they will actually destroy any remaining self-worth on the path to trying to find it, saying it's some sort of abuse that happened in childhood, whether it's sexual abuse, whether it's physical abuse, it's some sort of lack of unconditional love that you receive when you're a child. And when that manifests and you continue to have these experiences, you get older, and in your mind, you think that your sex is your value. Then she added this caption: the world promotes self, that we must be selfish. We must idolize ourselves. We must put our careers in front of relationships and families. But what does our soul crave? Community, family, unconditional love. Maybe that's why I've been so empty for so long. Too busy filling worldly needs rather than soul. As I read the Bible, I understand more of what our soul craves. And I would just like to add this. She is correct when she tells you in all honesty that a high-value man is not going to get involved in any serious sort of way with someone who turns themselves into a living sex doll and sells themselves as a commodity to the creepiest human beings on earth. If you put a low value on yourself, no one else is going to raise your price. When was the last time that you walked into a store and asked to pay more for a product? But, having said that, for the women who have already made a self-destructive choice, I want to tell you that that does not mean that it's all over for them. That is a lie that we all tell ourselves when we make mistakes, and we all have. The truth is that there are going to be consequences because no one has a magic wand. And one of those consequences, only one, is that it will take time to show quality men that that is not the person that you are anymore. It will take time for you to address the damage that led you down this path in the first place to become a high-quality mate yourself, and time to address the damage that you caused to yourself while you were on this path. But many decent men will be open to a relationship with you if they truly believe that that is not you anymore. That doesn't mean that all good men will be open to it, because they are still signing up to deal with problems that they had no choice in creating. And you cannot be angry at the people who don't voluntarily choose to do that to their lives in order to make you feel better. Choosing a mate is not an act of charity. It is a very serious thing that involves two people, a serious thing that has more impact on your life than any other choice does. But many people out there want to be seen as more than the sum of their mistakes, and so they are willing to treat others in that same way. It is important to say that. It is also important, having said that, to point out that that is not an invitation to do something that is very self-destructive now and repent later, because there is a cost, and nothing will change that cost. Good men are not easy to find, and you have just narrowed the field for yourself immensely. And on top of that, if your about face does not come across as sincere or profound because it was pre-planned and you went into this with your eyes wide open, that is not going to have the same effect as a person who actually changes and evolves into someone who is now unrecognizable from their former self. So, you should not go down this path if you haven't yet, because the costs are going to be very, very high. But if you have already gone down this path, that reality, that truth, does not mean that you might as well stay on this path because your options are gone forever. Your options are always going to be different from what they would have been, but given time and a true change, there will be worthwhile options available to you. Maybe not a plethora of them, but they will be out there. And you are not trapped in this, even though it very much feels that way. You believed the lie that got you into this. It is always easier to believe a lie than it is to believe the truth. I am telling you the truth right now, even if it does not sparkle in the same way that the lie did. Okay, enough of the heavy, serious discussions for now. Let's switch back to the very unserious headlines. The Democrats' performative stunt machine, the 78-year-old Representative Al Green, will be exiting Congress with his Mr. Peanut cane after more than 2 decades there, because he was crushed in the Democrat primary by Representative Christian Menifee in the runoff election for Texas's 18th congressional district, which represents parts of Houston. This wasn't even close. Mr. Menifee blew Green out of the water when he earned nearly 70% of the vote to Green's 30%, signaling that most of the public, no matter which side of the issues they come down on, seem to be getting weary of performative stunts, and that is all that Al Green brought to the table. For example, he performatively introduced articles of impeachment against President Trump just 2 weeks after Inauguration Day in 2025. Even the rest of his Democrat members of Congress rolled their eyes and refused to spend any of their credibility supporting that stunt. At Trump's State of the Union a couple of months later, in March 2025, the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, was finally forced to remove Green from the House chamber after he started yelling during the speech and refused to remain quiet, despite being repeatedly instructed to do so and warned of the consequences if he continued behaving like a child. A nearly 90-year-old man yelling at the clouds does not work in Congress. And so Green was later censured by the House for his clamor. The next year, at the latest State of the Union back in February, Green was again kicked out after he disrupted Trump's speech while holding up a truly bizarre sign that read, quote, "Black people aren't apes," even though no one had claimed that they were. But maybe he was having prolonged 60s flashbacks. After all, he was there. Green's replacement as the Democrat nominee, 38-year-old Menifee, received around $5 million from Protect Progress, a pro-cryptocurrency political action committee that supports Democrat candidates. That PAC ran one pro-Menifee ad featuring the failed Democrat candidate for Senate and the outgoing Texas Representative Jasmine Crockett, the lowest IQ person to ever sit in the chambers of Congress, and that is saying something considering Marjorie Taylor Greene was once a member of Congress. Maybe there's just something wrong with people whose last name is Greene. In that ad, Crockett said, "We need a new generation of fighters who are ready to throw down for what's right." My friend, Christian Menifee is that fighter. Christian Menifee took on MAGA in Texas and won. Win. Menifee will now be facing off against the Republican candidate Ronald Whitfield in the November midterms, and given that this is a heavily Democrat district, he is expected to win. And speaking of updates in blue cities, the Trump administration is apparently making plans to pull the government's customs officers from any international airports in the sanctuary cities that refuse to play ball with federal immigration authorities. If they refuse to follow immigration law, and they allow a terrorist into the country through their port of entry, and then they openly intend to refuse to hand said terrorist over to ICE for deportation, even after he commits a crime here, then they are simply not going to be allowed to be a port of entry that endangers all of us. The new Homeland Security Secretary, Mark Wayne Mullen of Oklahoma, revealed all of this on Tuesday night on Hannity, where he said that officials are currently drawing up plans to stop the processing of all international travelers into sanctuary airports by pulling their staff and shutting down the customs checks at those airports. Meanwhile, several sanctuary Democrats, including New Jersey's Governor Mickey Sherrill, joined protesters outside of the Delaney Hall Detention Center in protests that turned violent, where agitators have clashed with federal authorities and built illegal barricades to block entrances and exits, while calling the reporters that were covering their crimes Nazi bitches. That's a quote. According to Secretary Mullen, when some demonstrators attempted to illegally block the entrances to the federal facility, the local police refused to respond. But according to DHS authorities, they did arrest some of the rioters anyway on Tuesday night for allegedly assaulting, resisting, and impeding federal officers. And there are laws against doing all of those things. Earlier that day, Secretary Mullen had met with White House officials to discuss his airport plan, saying, I said, if they're going to not allow us to go out and arrest the worst of the worst, and then when we call for assistance at the facilities, that the street, it belongs to the city. If it belonged to us, we would take care of it, but it belongs to the city. And they're barricading our employees from coming in and out of the facility, then why are we processing international flights into the airports there? We are currently, which we are not initiating yet, but we are currently drawing up plans to say, listen, in these sanctuary cities where the local radical left Democrats aren't allowing us to do our job and enforce federal laws, then we shouldn't be processing international flights into their cities either, because they don't want us to enforce immigration, but they want us to process immigration at their facilities? Nothing about that makes sense to me. Back in April, Secretary Mullen told Bret Baier of Fox News, I believe sanctuary cities are not lawful. They're not. I don't think they're able to do that. They aren't. And so we're going to take a hard look at this. If they're sanctuary cities, should they really be processing customs into their city? If they're a sanctuary city and they're receiving international flights, and we're asking them to partner with us at the airport, but once they walk out of the airport, they're not going to enforce immigration policy, maybe we need to have a really hard look at that, because we need to focus on cities that want to work with us. This potential move is only weeks ahead of the FIFA World Cup, which is expected to draw millions of foreign travelers into the United States. But maybe not through sanctuary cities. So book your flights accordingly, or it's on you. And while we are on the subject of blue sanctuaries, a California veteran who was known for plastering his home with American flags was killed in a brutal and unprovoked attack in broad daylight outside of his home in Southern California. And his heartbroken widow believes that it was his patriotism that made him a target, and she does seem to be right about that based on the evidence so far. Authorities announced that 69-year-old Kerry George Sharon tragically succumbed to his injuries on Sunday evening, just hours before Memorial Day, after spending the last several days of his life fighting to keep it in the local ICU. The horrifying assault that took the life of a veteran unfolded on May 20th at a little after 2 in the afternoon outside of Mr. Sheridan's Escondido home, a property that is widely known by locals as the neighborhood's outlying Trump House. According to prosecutors, 32-year-old Thomas Caleb Butler ambushed the nearly 70-year-old veteran. A 32-year-old cowardly thug beat up a 70-year-old man by punching and stomping on Mr. Sheridan's head at least twice. When a brave bystander attempted to intervene in order to halt the unhinged bloodshed, Butler allegedly advanced on him, threw a punch, and hurled criminal threats at the heroic Good Samaritan before fleeing the scene on foot like the cowardly scumbag that he is. However, Escondido cops quickly tracked Butler down, and he only made it a few blocks before handcuffs were slapped on his wrists. He was initially booked for attempted murder, elder abuse causing great bodily injury, battery, and making threats. He has pled not guilty to those charges. But there is the witness who saw it all. And now, with Mr. Sharon's tragic passing, San Diego County prosecutors are reviewing the circumstances to determine whether to upgrade those charges to murder, which obviously they should be upgraded to murder. There is not even an argument to be made otherwise. You already charged him with attempted murder, indicating his motive, and now his victim is dead. The person who attacked him killed him. Whether that person was Butler or not will be determined by a jury of his peers, but that a murder did take place is not even a legitimate question. Meanwhile, Mr. Sharon's devastated widow, Maria Garcia, is convinced that her husband's bold political displays were the reason for the deadly rage of this brutal lunatic, telling CBS 8, "They don't like the flags. I don't know why. I support America. My husband is a veteran." Family friends claim that the Sharon's patriotic home had been targeted by anti-Trump vandals in the past. A family friend, Jim Gilly, said that back in March, people came through with razor blades and cut up a bunch of Kerry's flags. Kerry was used to it because he'd come out here with his Trump sign and stuff during the week and flags, and people would drive by and honk and wave. And most of the people are good. But when someone would flip him off, he'd just look at me and say, "They have their right to freedom of speech too." To their credit, after this attack took place, the local community rallied around the home, placing flowers and holding vigils on the sidewalk. Devastated neighbors are now vowing to keep watch over the property to ensure Mr. Sharon's beloved flags continue to fly high. His widow simply said, "I want to remember my husband, how he was a very good man. Service in the church, service in the army. For me, he's my hero." Meanwhile, Yusef Miller of the North County Equity and Justice Coalition called the killing a wake-up call for a divided nation, saying, "What happened to our fellow veteran is something that should have never happened. This is an example, when we lost Kerry, of how far we've gone off the wrong track." Yes, it is. This is what happens when you create a Frankenstein and tell your little pet monster that it is okay to kill for politics if the political opponent has been incorrectly labeled a Nazi or a fascist, words that have actual meanings that do not apply to the people that you use them against. And speaking of Frankenstein, let's take a look at one of the Democrats' candidates. They put her forward as representative of the beliefs they hold, and she was defeated by Democrat voters. So let's look at why. Maureen Galindo said online that she wanted to turn ICE detention centers into concentration camps that would hold American Zionists. That is who Democrats put forward as a congressional candidate before this professional sex therapist lost their primary runoff for a key House seat in Texas. Her Democrat opponent was Bexar County's Deputy Sheriff Johnny Garcia. He won the Democrat nomination for Texas's 35th congressional district with 64% of the vote on Tuesday, according to KSAT, which conversely tells you that way too large of a portion of Democrats voted for this fascist nut job, and I use that word based on its actual meaning. To give you a taste of how bizarre this Democrat primary was, Maureen Galindo's own campaign had posted on Instagram that, and I quote, "When Maureen gets into Congress, she'll write legislation so that all Zionism and support of Zionism is undoubtedly anti-Semitic, since it's Zionist harming the Semites." End quote. That backcrack crazy post added that Galindo would then, quote, "turn Karnes ICE detention center into a prison for American Zionists and former ICE officers for human trafficking," adding that their concentration camp would serve as, quote, "a castration processing center for pedophiles, which will probably be most of the Zionists," end quote. Galindo later clarified on her Instagram that the comments that had been made by her campaign, quote, "did not mean putting all Jews in internment camps. Apparently, only people that think they have a right to exist in their own ancestral homeland. So much better." As she conceded the race on Tuesday night, this walking advertisement for the need for involuntary committal, the nutjob therapist Galindo declared, according to the Washington Post, that, quote, "Israel won tonight. Israel doesn't give a shit about you, lady. But this is only the beginning for us." To quote Michael Jordan, "Stop it. Get some help." The victor, Garcia, stuck to the sad story that this lunatic was actually a right-wing plant. Yeah, because most conservatives are anti-Zionist sex therapists. He wrote on X that while Republicans tried to meddle in our election, Texas Democrats showed that we won't stand for hate. Oh, clearly. But to be fair, Galindo's anti-Semitic post about repurposing ICE detention centers to be castration internment camps for the allies of Jews did draw criticism from some of her fellow Democrats. In fact, the Democrat Congressional Campaign Committee, the DCCC, labeled Galindo as MAGA Marine. "She's all yours, people. Don't blame us for it," in their recent ad. They don't even have the courage to claim their own Frankenstein. Even squad member Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez called Galindo's remarks absolutely disgusting, adding that the donors behind the Republican super PAC funding her should be exposed. Please do, because they are non-existent. But, assuming I'm wrong, I actually would like to know, can you say the same, AOC? Didn't think so. In the meantime, you have been fomenting this stuff on your side of the aisle ever since the day after October 7th. So the call is coming from inside the House, and gaslighting isn't going to work just because the tides have shifted and people are getting sick of this. Given that you can't control your own Frankensteins, and they're saying the quiet part out loud for everyone to hear, and everyone is disgusted. In the meantime, the Democrat representatives, Josh Gothamer of New Jersey and Jared Moskowitz of Florida, pledged to expel Galindo from Congress if she were to win her election, which she thankfully has not. Representative Moskowitz posted to X, "My grandmother was part of the Kinder transport out of Berlin. Her parents were killed in Auschwitz. My kids are never going to the camps." Again, I say to you, sir, the call is coming from inside the House. For the sake of your kids, purge your party. Speaking of which, federal authorities arrested 2 more Minnesota women this week, who now stand accused of orchestrating, just between the 2 of them, a more than $21 million Medicaid fraud scam tied to autism treatment programs. The latest bombshell case in a deeply entrenched culture of public assistance fraud under Minnesota's former governor, Tim Walz, the Democrats' last nominee to be vice president of the entire country, who they would have no doubt put forward as president after that. The Department of Homeland Security announced that their investigators, working with federal partners, arrested Shamso Ahmed Hassan and Hananan Mursal Youssef on charges that include conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud, 8 counts of healthcare fraud, and 2 counts of money laundering. The Assistant Secretary for that department, Lauren Biss, said in an exclusive statement to the Daily Wire, "These Minnesota residents have been accused of stealing more than $21 million from the American taxpayer. Their Medicaid fraud scheme started during the COVID pandemic and lasted for 4 years. Homeland Security investigations continues to zero in on the rampant fraud in Minnesota. Under Secretary Mullen, we will end the defrauding of the American people." Here's what happened. According to prosecutors, Hassan was an owner of Smart Therapy Center, LLC, and of Star Autism Center, LLC, both of which were enrolled in Minnesota's Early Intensive Developmental and Behavioral Intervention Program. You people need to learn to edit, which is commonly known as the EIDBI. Federal authorities say that both accused women carried out the fraud scam of submitting Medicaid claims for autism treatment services that were never provided, a scam which they started running in May of 2020 and continued running until December of 2024, draining $21 million from taxpayers and from children who actually needed treatment. The indictment against them claims that Hassan and her co-conspirators recruited con parents to enroll their children in the autism programs, regardless of medical necessity, and then paid the complicit families monthly kickbacks for their part in the fraud. Those kickbacks range from roughly $300 a month to $1,500 a month. And yes, those parents need to be prosecuted for their fraud too. Between 2020 and 2024, prosecutors say that Hassan billed Minnesota's Medicaid program for approximately $46.6 million and ultimately received around $21.1 million in taxpayer funds, even though she tried to steal even more than that massive amount from us. Authorities also allege that portions of the money that she successfully stole were used to purchase property, while other funds were transferred overseas. On Tuesday morning, Hassan pled not guilty to the charges of healthcare fraud and money laundering. According to the local reports, she was not taken into custody after her court appearance. Her case stems from a broader federal investigation into Minnesota fraud networks. Federal agents had previously raided Smart Therapy Center's office in Minneapolis and the Star Autism Center in St. Cloud back in December of 2024. One of Smart Therapy Center's other owners has already pled guilty to wire fraud charges. And you will remember that just last week, federal prosecutors announced charges against 15 new defendants who now stand accused of stealing more than $90 million through multiple Medicaid and social service programs in Minnesota. During that recent press conference in Minneapolis, officials described Minnesota as being ground zero for the large-scale fraud that has drained these taxpayer-funded programs that were created to serve vulnerable populations like the disabled, the homeless, and children who actually have autism, not to fund scammers that are stealing from those very groups to fund terrorists overseas in Al-Shabaab. In fact, autism-related Medicaid programs became a central focus of that press conference when prosecutors noted that, in an example of one such program, costs reportedly ballooned from roughly $600,000 a year, $600,000, just 6 years ago, to now shelling out nearly $400 million a year today. And that raised no red flags at all, which can only be explained if you're frickin' complicit in it. Health and Human Services Secretary RFK Jr. described the Minnesota autism fraud operation as the largest autism fraud bust in American history, pointing out that this was organized theft that exploited the most vulnerable children in America. While the vice chair of the White House Anti-Fraud Task Force, Andrew Ferguson, warned fraud is going to bleed our social programs dry. Stopping fraud is how we save these programs. And he's right about that. The money is not endless, despite what you may think if you have never thought about it. As for the latest two wretched thieves, both of the suspects are expected to remain in federal custody pending further judicial proceedings. With so much egg or mud on their plate, you would expect Democrats to be focused on the present. But oddly enough, some of them are focused on trying to rewrite the past, especially the parts that are not rewritable. The former First Lady, Jill Biden, was called out for blatant lying after she tried to gaslight the nation like it's still 2020 about her husband's disastrous debate performance against Donald Trump, the one that ended his candidacy. His wife actually told CBS News in an interview clip that was released midweek that at the time she was frightened of what she was seeing and thought that her husband was having a stroke. After a video of her remarks went viral, commenters were quick to set the record straight by pointing out that at the time, on video, immediately after the debate, Jill claimed that her husband had done a great job and had answered all the questions. Now, a sad attempt at a rewrite is underway. She told CBS News, quote, "I was frightened. I had never, ever seen Joe like that before or since. We have. When I watched it, I thought, oh my God, he's having a stroke, and it scared me to death." This lie made quite the stark contrast when it was compared against her videoed reaction immediately after the debate, in which she said, in the tone that you would use to speak to a toddler. "Joe, you did such a great job. You answered every question. You knew all the facts." No one was buying the attempt to memory hold the reality that we all remember for ourselves, and frequently see clips of, in this internet age where everything lasts forever. The New York Post columnist Miranda Devine responded to the unconvincing gaslighting by noting, "Sorry, but this is such BS." If she genuinely was frightened that he was having a stroke, then any rational wife would have insisted he go straight to the hospital. Instead, she dragged him off to a Waffle House and patronized him on stage like a baby. "Joe, you did such a great job." We saw his incapacity for years. Don't try to rewrite history. End quote. You should take her advice, Democrats. Over at Axios, the reporter Alex Thompson quoted a former Biden official who responded to this clip by telling him that, quote, "she's lying." And Jill wasn't the only Democrat getting called out. Spencer Pratt doubled down on his campaign to become the next mayor of Los Angeles, telling Fox and Friends on Thursday that frustrated voters from all across the political spectrum are rallying behind his message of addressing the real issues like public safety, reform for homelessness policies that are not working, and accountability for the government that is there to serve the people. Basically, regardless of political party, most people are tired of being fed flowery words that only result in catastrophic outcomes. They want results. And many of them are ready to vote for anyone who will give them said results. And many are ready to vote out anyone who won't. And both parties should take note of that reality. Mr. Pratt has surged into the national spotlight in his local race as a long-shot challenger to the current disastrous mayor, Karen Bass. Mr. Pratt believes that his campaign is resonating precisely because he refuses to engage in partisan politics, and instead he focuses on the city's basic failures, the ones that everyone is sick of living with. During his interview, he clearly stated, "I don't do national politics. I don't do parties. I just say, look, they're stealing all of our tax money to give it to drug addicts, to have needles and tourniquets. And they're actually even selling the drugs to these addicts to let people die on our sidewalks." Mr. Pratt claimed that the voters are increasingly gravitating towards him as an outsider because the residents of LA have lost faith in the city's legacy leadership after years of seeing things significantly worsen on multiple fronts under their approach, from homelessness to crime and public disorder, saying they spent all of our tax money to increase problems. People want an outsider that's not a politician, that's just saying the facts, the truth. These people have failed us. Like his support, Mr. Pratt's fundraising has also surged after his performance in the recent mayoral debate. He said, "People forget. Over 50,000 people a year leave Los Angeles because it's so terrible. These are actually former Angelenos that got forced out of this city that Mayor Bass has destroyed. And that's why they're donating, because they want me to be mayor so they can move back." Mr. Pratt is registered as a Republican, but he has repeatedly emphasized that his support is largely coming from Democrats that are fed up and angry with the city's current blind, stubborn, result-ignoring direction. pointing out that Democrats are very angry with what happened to Los Angeles. They were fed a bunch of lies by Mayor Bass, who said she was going to literally solve homelessness. It's a nonpartisan race. There's no letter next to either of our names because the mayor is not supposed to represent a party. They're supposed to make sure your moms are safe, your houses don't burn down, and your tax money is going to your infrastructure, not to fund drug addicts. Mr. Pratt is hoping to avoid a runoff altogether, saying, I have a feeling God wants me to just win with 51% on June 2nd and it's over. To this end, he is urging his supporters to actually get out and vote, not to just vent online, arguing that low voter turnout is exactly what has helped to perpetuate decades of failed leadership in Los Angeles. But giving up means that this will be your fate. Mr. Pratt and his parents both lost their homes in the devastating LA fires, along with thousands of others. During this week's interview, Mr. Pratt blamed Karen Bass and California's leadership for the city's non-existent rebuilding in the year and a half since then, and he painted a very grim picture of the recovery efforts in Pacific Palisades, saying, the reality is a lot of these people now don't get to come back because of Mayor Bass. Out of 7,000 people, maybe 600 houses are in the works. And in over 18 months, maybe 9 houses have been built. He also took direct aim at LA's socialist council member, Nithya Raman, accusing both her and Bass of allowing homelessness and drug abuse to spiral out of control, while dismissing the legitimate concerns of parents about encampments of high addicts near schools. He rightly pointed out the drug addicts that are attacking moms, that are naked in front of kids. That is on her and Mayor Bass. While Mr. Pratt remains one of the most unconventional and frankly fun political figures out there right now, his blunt rhetoric as an outsider is also apparently gaining traction in a frustrated city that is drowning in surging crime, surging homelessness, and surging costs of living. It's not working, people. Change course. So, with her own outcomes pulling her under, Karen Bass decided to try and put Spencer Pratt down for being a former reality TV star. But that prompted a true scandal in which Mr. Pratt brought out the receipts. He fired back by publicly posting a Los Angeles Times article from decades ago that referred to Bass by name, traveling to Cuba in the 1970s as a part of the Venceremos Brigade, which is a communist activist group that was identified in intelligence documents as allegedly teaching terrorist tactics and guerrilla warfare to Americans. Mr. Pratt posted this Times article, along with a reasonable statement that read, when I was in my 20s, I was on a TV show. When Karen Bass was in her 20s, she was training in terrorist tactics and guerrilla warfare with communists in Cuba, back when the LA Times was still in LA and used to tell the truth. End quote. The Los Angeles Times article from 1983 stated clearly that Bass had traveled to Cuba with the 6th contingent of the Venceremos Brigade. It also reported that a 1973 intelligence document had described that very brigade as a group that trains revolutionary-prone Americans in terrorist tactics and guerrilla warfare while claiming to harvest sugarcane. The Times article also reported that Bass was a brigade leader who returned from Cuba to the USA, bringing back propaganda literature. Bass denied all of this at the time, claiming her trips with the brigade were educational. Is that what you call it? Having started the online brawl, Bass definitely caught the worst of it as Mr. Pratt's post spread across social media like one of Bass's wildfires. Critics accused Bass and her allies of trying to reduce Pratt to a punchline while simultaneously treating her own shady political history with bubble-wrapped kid gloves. After Bass was endorsed by California's equally disastrous Democrat governor, Gavin Newsom, Mr. Pratt told Fox that it's not shocking because they're alleged criminal partners. They're both complicit in laundering $24 billion to actually increase homelessness. Facts. Pratt also pointed out that the residents of Los Angeles have eyes, and each of them can clearly see the conditions getting worse, despite years of record spending coming out of their bucket. Spending that was extorted by pretty, yet empty, promises from their state leaders, saying anybody with eyeballs in the state of California or Los Angeles knows that there has not been a reduction in one homeless person. Actually, there's been an increase of naked drug addict zombies in front of every kid's playground, every kid's school, every coffee shop. Game, set, match, Pratt. But LA's Democrats were not the only ones starting bully fights and ending up having their asses handed to them. Seattle's thin blue line of law enforcement spent their week refusing to bow down to their city hall's woke thought police. In an attempt to muzzle the rank-and-file cops that actually serve that city and have to live with the results on the streets, Seattle's mayor, Katie Wilson, tried to strong-arm Seattle's Police Officers Guild into removing a social media post that they had made, which highlighted a blood-soaked triple shooting. There was nothing that was inaccurate about that post, but it did make the mayor and the policies that are being pushed by the far left look bad in the face of the results that they create. Despite the tyrannical bullying that is so consistent of wokies, the cops aren't backing down from their local anti-police regime. Instead, they're firing back with a clear message that they won't be intimidated into silence. You can only be canceled if you let them cancel you, people. Here's how this went down. Things erupted after a horrific ambush took place outside a Capitol Hill nightclub. That ambush left 3 people's blood pouring out onto the pavement. The police union blasted a video of the carnage with a direct and common sense demand. Mayor Katie, how many more examples do you need? Don't take away the vital tools officers rely on. This was a reference to Wilson halting the expansion of that city's surveillance cameras, which feed the real-time footage to the crime center. This vital tech is desperately needed to hunt down killers in Seattle, especially while the police department suffocates under an unprecedented staffing crisis due to bad policies turning that profession into a losing proposition. But instead of dealing with the violent thugs that are and have been terrorizing Seattle's liberal streets, Wilson's spreadsheet warriors focused on weaponizing City Hall to protect her fragile ego from being confronted with reality. By the next morning, the mayor's office had issued a threatening email to the president of Seattle's Police Officers Guild, Kent Lewis, falsely claiming that the post broke police policy and the municipal code before demanding, please pull the post immediately. Mr. Lewis decided to expose them instead. It's kind of like Mel Gibson on Ransom, telling KOMO, that's an order. I looked at the content of the email. I thought, well, that sounds like a threat. To make the mayor's bullying temper tantrum even more embarrassing, City Hall got the facts completely wrong. The speech is violence bureaucrats claimed that the union leaked sensitive city camera footage, but in reality, that video was already publicly available, given that it came straight from KOMO's news broadcast. Mr. Luz even sent the clueless censorship regime the link to prove it, saying, in no way do I feel like I'm being unprofessional by alerting the public to a publicly sourced video, pointing to the fact that these work, and those capture good data for us. But the good guys weren't done yet. The Guild hit back at the mayor for her bullying by sending a cease and desist order, which legally freezes any attempts to discipline officers over the free speech controversy until a judge weighs in on it. Realizing that they had brought their COVID masks to a gunfight, Mayor Wilson's team then pulled a U.E. by retracting their censorship demand and claiming that they look forward to working with the police union. Well, they may have started this fight, but the cops intend to end it. Mr. Luz says that the Guild will continue to blast Wilson's soft-on-crime lunacy and make the results as public as possible, saying, we're not changing our tone, our rhetoric. We're not going to be threatened or intimidated. Good for you, sir. But other dangers, besides woke tyrants on a power trip, abound elsewhere, and you really should know about them and have them on your radar. On Tuesday, a Superior Court judge in Delaware ruled that in the small town of Fenwick Island, companies can cast votes in their local elections. In that city, one man, one vote is dead. Now, artificial entities get extra votes so that the outcomes can be manipulated accordingly. If you own a company, each of the people there don't just get a vote. The company gets to vote too, as though it is a person. So who made this ruling? And no doubt wants to be known for what they did with the power that was entrusted to them. That would be Delaware's Superior Court Judge Craig A. Karsnitz, K-A-R-S-N-I-T-Z, who cited not a legal precedent, but the apparent philosopher Diogo Joao Baptista Gomez, I haven't heard of him either, in his ruling that decided under the legal definition of a person, quote, any adult, corporation, or institution is a person, end quote. No, it's not. According to Reuters, as of 2025, 12% of all registered voters in the small Sussex town were corporations, including over 200 artificial entities. This is not the first attempt to steal power from the actual voters and transfer it somewhere that it does not belong, which is conveniently enough where it can be controlled and will benefit them the most. Here is what happened. The ACLU of Delaware sued the town of Fenwick Island after it permitted non-resident property owners there to vote in municipal elections. You just had to be able to afford to buy a tiny piece of property in that town, and even if you never lived there, you get to vote. Andrew Bernstein of the ACLU pointed out, there are over 2 million artificial business entities incorporated in Delaware and only about 1 million people. This undemocratic quack judge stated that the ACLU failed to demonstrate how Fenwick Island's policy violated the one person, one vote principle, given that this judge randomly defines a corporate entity as being a person who gets one vote. In the update to Fenwick Island's charter in 2008, the Delaware General Assembly revised the voter qualifications section of the town's charter. This is what resulted in authorization of non-resident property owners who live somewhere else, including LLCs, corporations, and trusts, being allowed to vote in municipal elections so long as they register to vote by March 1st for any subsequent election. Because Delaware law unilaterally declares that a corporation is a person, despite that being a blatant lie, Judge Karsnitz says that his ruling just keeps some persons, meaning big companies, from being discriminated against as people when it comes to voting. Yes, it's just like allowing black people to vote. The judge stated in his ruling, visions of faceless large corporations or even how controlling a small town are frightening and the stuff of science fiction. However, plaintiff has not demonstrated that this policy violates the principle of one person / entity, one vote, and matters of policy are appropriately left to legislative bodies, not the courts. So now the door is open for more artificial entities to control elections at the local level. Are bots people? AI avatars? Do elections now belong to the biggest bot farm? Does Xi Jinping get to vote if he buys a piece of property in your neighborhood? It is very simple. People are people. That is the end of the definition of people. Companies are companies. Companies are not people. No matter what harebrained lunacy you unilaterally declare, Your Honor. The people at the companies are entitled to a vote, but the company itself is not a person, and it does not get a vote. The ACLU pointed out that in Fenwick Island's election in 2024, non-human votes made up the entire voter margin between the winner and the runner-up. They decided that election. Following the landmark Supreme Court case, Citizens United versus FEC in 2010, which must be overturned for so many reasons, all of which have devastated American elections. After that disastrous ruling, the national debate started to focus on whether a corporation was a person. And I don't care which party you're on, this should scare the crap out of you, because either party could take advantage of it and make your votes non-existent as far as counting. As a result, in 2013, a lawmaker in Montana introduced a bill allowing corporations to vote in municipal elections as long as they owned property locally, which corporations do have the extra money to do, I would point out. That bill was tabled without being passed. In 2023, Seaford, another town in Delaware, briefly attempted to expand their voting to businesses. Despite a lack of momentum elsewhere to give rich company owners the ability to buy extra votes for the price of a piece of property, corporations getting involved in elections, which is what Citizens United did, has skyrocketed fundraising, which has only turned our political arena into a circus. along with many other issues, but at least companies have not been given the right to vote elsewhere. Yet, this sets precedent, and as I pointed out, other politicians have tried to get it in their cities. Citizens United has to be overturned. That has to become a top priority in the Supreme Court now. In the meantime, Fenwick Island's election laws remain entirely unique to that town. The ACLU's challenge against them remains the only direct legal challenge to artificial entities taking over voting. And the ACLU does still have the right to appeal this case to Delaware's Supreme Court, and they have to. There were problems elsewhere, however. A 26-year-old man whose brain has just finished solidifying, but not productively, in Texas, was officially charged for making a threat to kill Erica Kirk and making a terrorist threat to bomb an upcoming Turning Point USA event where Charlie's widow is scheduled to speak. That is all according to the authorities. The latest unhinged mind virus nightmare started after a local newspaper shared a Facebook post that was promoting TPUSA's Women Leadership Summit, which, according to KSAT TV, is scheduled for June 5th through the 7th at the San Antonio Marriott River Center on that city's beautiful Riverwalk. According to law enforcement, the suspect, some pathetic loser named Jacob Winsky, replied to that post by stating, "I know exactly where to bomb." Authorities say Winsky posted in that same thread, "I can't wait to be the valet for her escort." According to the arrest warrant, in a subsequent email, Winsky escalated his threats, writing, "Death to Erica Kirk and every single speaker there. America will live on without those scum on this earth. Every Christian nationalist shall perish in the bombing that will take place at every single Turning Point rally and event." End quote. So, Winsky had his fun by seriously threatening bloodshed, and now he is charged with a third-degree felony count of making a terrorist threat involving deliberately inciting fear of serious bodily injury and public disruption, the definition of terrorism. KSAT TV reported that his bond was set at a combined total of $120,000, and I would advise all bail businesses to avoid this one. Because if something happens, you're going to be on the hook for the lunatic. In a statement to Fox News Digital, TPUSA's spokesman, Matt Shoup, said that the organization is, of course, treating these threats very seriously after what happened to Charlie, saying the safety of our attendees, speakers, and staff is always our top priority. All TPUSA events include enhanced, multi-layered security measures enforced by both private security and local police. We refuse to let threats silence us. We look forward to a successful and inspiring gathering June 5th through the 7th in San Antonio for more than 2,500 women attending the Women's Leadership Summit. As for Mrs. Kirk, she has recently been drawing attention to the media and cultural climate that are both fueling political violence, arguing that this very thing contributed to the assassination of her young husband, Charlie Kirk, last September. After the recent shooting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, Mrs. Kirk stated that, "Seems to me that nothing will ever be enough for the evil in this world. Our country has become unrecognizable. These people have perverted the truth to the point that they motivated the murder of my husband." True. And I would just point out that you really ought to think ahead, have something called foresight, and stop, pull away from this, because the more people who listen to you and become deranged and commit violence, the more victims there will be. And the more victims there will be, human nature being what it is, people will start looking for someone to blame. That's just how human beings work. I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying it is. We talked about should versus is earlier. This is not what should be. This is what is. People will start looking for someone to blame. The more people end up getting hurt. And the person that they're going to start blaming is you. The people who are promoting the rhetoric that incites the violence. So I would encourage you to use your foresight to knock it the hell off. For your own sake. Because becoming the crowd's scapegoat isn't fun. But this young widow and mother of two was not the only vulnerable person being threatened by bullying losers who like to punch down like the cowards that they are. The Oscar-winning actress Helen Mirren was accosted on the street by a deranged mind virus who called her a, and I quote, evil Zionist bitch, during an entirely unprovoked attack, of which there is, of course, footage, because there always is these days, people. The 80-year-old star was walking in London at night with her husband, Taylor Hackford, when this oh-so-brave attack on the elderly occurred. You freaking loser. Here's what happened. A man approached the couple in their 80s who greeted him with smiles before he unleashed on them like a lunatic who needs involuntary deprogramming, yelling, "There's Helen Mirren, the avowed Zionist." Your point? You said Israel should last forever because of the Holocaust. And indeed, the actress has made these types of comments in the past, as she has every right to do, even if she is wrong. But to top it off, she is right. So her 81-year-old husband told this loser to F off, while his wife turned her head away and remained silent, which is the best response to this level of ignorant stupidity. But stupidity rarely shuts its mouth, because that would require some actual wisdom. So he continued screeching. And she was very happy the Palestinians' houses were gone. You put the post up. We were all there. You're an evil Zionist bitch. Turning to her husband, he added, and you as well. F you and all. Bless you. The Telegraph reported that the Met Police are saying that they believe this all occurred last year, and they claimed that it will be treated as a hate incident. Because, they prosecute ridiculous stuff for hate crimes, so you know what? It at least needs to cut both ways. I don't think it should be there, but if it's going to be there, it needs to be applied equally. Their spokesperson said, "We are aware of a video circulating online showing a man and woman being subjected to anti-Semitic verbal abuse in Tower Hill. Officers are currently reviewing the footage and making attempts to contact the victims to establish whether they would like to report the incident." The Met continues to work hard to tackle hate crimes of all types, and officers across London have made more than 90 hate crime arrests since the end of March. Yeah, I wouldn't be bragging about that, dude. According to the New York Post, Ms. Mirren first visited Israel in 1967, and she has been a vocal supporter of that tiny nation over the years. She even played Israel's first female Prime Minister, Golda Meir, in the 2023 dramatic film, Golda. At the time, she told Israel's Channel 12, "I believe in Israel, in the existence of Israel, and I believe Israel has to go forward into the future for the rest of eternity. I believe in Israel because of the Holocaust." Meaning that not having their own nation led to 6 million of them being gassed, including 1.5 million children. So yeah, they actually need their own freaking country. Ms. Mirren is not Jewish herself, but on multiple occasions, she has still voiced her support for the only nation on earth to be singled out for questions of whether it has a right to exist, as though other people even have the right to decide that for them. Mrs. Mirren is publicly opposed to the boycott of Israeli film projects as a way of instituting collective punishment against all Jews, and she signed a letter supporting Israel's appearance in the Eurovision Song Contest last month. Ms. Mirren was also one of the 2,000 celebrities to sign the open letter condemning Hamas after their blood-soaked terrorist attack on October 7th, 2023. That letter clearly stated, this is terrorism, this is evil. So I would like to state clearly, finally, a celebrity that doesn't turn my stomach for their bigoted and ignorant, but I repeat myself, cowardice. Hats off to you, Ms. Mirren. And by the way, I loved you in White Nights. I also loved Baryshnikov, but that's a different story. Now I would like to share an article on another issue with you, one by Chloe Cole, the famous detransitioner, patient advocate, and plaintiff in the ongoing litigation against Kaiser Permanente. Maybe mispronouncing that. I'm going to be honest, I don't care. She recently wrote this piece in which she called on Home Depot to end its coverage of sex-rejecting transition interventions for minors. Writing, millions of American families trust Home Depot with their home improvement projects. Recently, I joined the company's shareholder meeting to ask whether the public should trust Home Depot with their children. I am a detransitioner. Between the ages of 12 and 16, I was placed on puberty blockers and testosterone, and at 15, surgeons removed my breasts. I carry those consequences in my body every single day. And when I spoke to Home Depot's board and shareholders, I told them something that every person in that room needed to hear. Your company's healthcare plan appears to cover these same interventions for covered dependents, including children. Shareholders deserve to know that. Families deserve better. This is not a political abstraction for me. I know exactly what these procedures take from a child because they took it from me. When my parents first sought help for what I was experiencing as a young teenager, they believed they would find counseling, support, and time. Instead, they were handed one option and a threat. Consent to these interventions, they were told, or your daughter will probably die. The ACLU's own top attorney has since acknowledged to the Supreme Court that there is no evidence that denying these interventions causes suicide. The claim used to pressure my family and thousands of families like mine was not medicine. It was a lie. Days before I raised this question at Home Depot's shareholder meeting, the Department of Justice made something clear to the entire country. This conduct is also fraud. The DOJ announced a landmark resolution against Texas Children's Hospital, the first action in its ongoing national investigation into pediatric gender transition procedures. Texas Children's Hospital has agreed to pay over $10 million in damages and civil penalties, permanently end these procedures on children, and perhaps most significantly, fund the first ever clinic in this country dedicated to restorative care for detransitioners. This is a turning point in our culture. Texas will be home to the first clinic that helps victims of these barbaric procedures get back to normalcy. That clinic matters to me personally. The medical interventions I received did not resolve my pain. They replaced it with permanent damage. and stripped me of the final years of my childhood. I am currently suing Kaiser Permanente, the healthcare system that profited from my confusion, because institutions that cause this harm should be held accountable. The DOJ has now signaled that the federal government agrees, and that every provider and institution still funding these procedures should take that seriously. Home Depot should take it seriously too. Based on publicly available information from the Human Rights Campaign, Home Depot still holds a perfect score on the Human Rights Campaign's Corporate Equality Index, a score earned in part by providing employee insurance coverage for puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgeries for covered dependents, including children. Industry leaders from Walmart to Lowe's, Ford, and Harley-Davidson have already stepped back from covering these practices. The medical authorities in more than 6 countries, including our own Department of Health and Human Services, have backed away, as both data and personal testimony have made the consequences undeniable. Over half the states across the country, including Georgia, where Home Depot is headquartered, have moved to protect minors from these procedures. The Supreme Court has upheld states' right to protect children in this way. The landscape has shifted. The question now is whether Home Depot shifts with it or waits for a federal investigation to make that decision for them. Former patients like me are speaking out and winning in court. Parents are organizing and showing up. The DOJ is investigating, and I will keep standing in shareholder meetings, legislative chambers, and wherever else I need to stand until every institution that has chosen ratings and outside pressure over the protection of children is made to answer for it. No child should need a lawsuit, a congressional hearing, or a federal fraud investigation to be protected from procedures that rob them of their bodies and their futures. Home Depot does not have to become part of what happened to me, but right now it is. And the window to change that is narrowing. Children deserve compassion, counseling, and time to grow up. They deserve to inherit their bodies intact. And the institutions still standing in the way of that deserve to know we are not going away. That story was not the only flash that created a boom. On Thursday night, a Blue Origin rocket exploded in Florida, producing a mushroom-capped fireball that looked like a nuke and causing immense damage to its billion-dollar launch pad, while potentially complicating NASA's plans to build a base on the moon. The damage to Blue Origin's launch pad at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station took place as that company was running a ground test on one of its rockets. The cause of the explosion has yet to be determined, but Blue Origin posted, "We experienced an anomaly during today's hot fire test. All personnel have been accounted for. We will provide updates as we learn more." The videos of the massive fireball online show a rocket sitting on the launch pad before flames engulfed everything like something out of the movie Oppenheimer. Jeff Bezos, the billionaire founder of Blue Origin, said that all personnel are accounted for and safe. It's too early to know the root cause, but we're already working to find it. Very rough day, but we'll rebuild whatever needs rebuilding and get back to flying. It's worth it. Elon Musk, who runs their rival, SpaceX, responded to the explosion by saying, "Sorry to see this. I hope you recover quickly. Most unfortunate. Rockets are hard." At the time, Blue Origin was preparing to launch 48 low Earth orbit satellites for Amazon Leo, which is a high-speed internet provider that competes with Elon Musk's Starlink. Those satellites were supposed to be carried into orbit by Blue Origin's New Glenn rocket, a reusable heavy-lift rocket that was named after the historic American astronaut John Glenn. But the explosion did extensive damage to Blue Origin's Launch Complex 36, which cost more than $1 billion to build and was only completed in 2021. According to Space Insider, each launch of the New Glenn rocket costs around $68 million. In the meantime, Space Force issued a warning to the public, telling them that the debris from this explosion may wash up on shore over the next few weeks, and it warned people not to touch those materials, but to instead alert the authorities. Meanwhile, this explosion could impact NASA's plans for historic space exploration because Blue Origin was supposed to be involved in transporting NASA's astronauts out of lunar orbit and down to the surface of the moon as a part of the plans to build a space station there. In fact, NASA is supposed to test its spacecraft integration with the proposed landers from Blue Origin and from SpaceX for the Artemis 3 mission. The NASA administrator, Jared Isaacman, stated, "Spaceflight is unforgiving, and developing new heavy-lift launch capability is extraordinarily difficult. We will work with our partners to support a thorough investigation of this anomaly, assess near-term mission impacts, and get back to launching rockets. We will provide information on any impacts to the Artemis and moon-based programs as it becomes available." Meanwhile, other people already seem to be on the moon. New Mexico's Democrat governor, Michelle Grisham, decided to demonstrate how girl math works for the entire country when she went full feminist mode to declare that Democrats don't need any male votes to win elections, saying at a Democrat National Committee meeting on Thursday about the upcoming 2028 presidential election, "If women, Democratic women, just show up and vote, we're good. We don't need any of the men." End quote. Now, while I start off by acknowledging that some men out there do vote Democrat, let's look at the actual claim that she just made, which is that Democrats don't need any men to vote for them in order to win. Here's how actual mathematics works. The reality is that half of the people in this country are men. Half. So if none of them vote Democrat, which is the scenario that she is describing, then at best, Democrats and Republicans would be neck and neck with each other, and it would come down to how the Electoral College broke down. And that is only if you do not take into account that many women out there actually do vote Republican, leaving Democrats, in the world that she envisions at least, with a large chunk of female voters, and that's it, trying to outweigh and beat all of the other demographics combined. So the claim that Democrat women by themselves are enough to carry an election without any men defies the laws of mathematics. But if you ignore the stupidity of the claim that she actually made and try to strongman her own case for her, bless your heart, and try to help the poor dear out, it is true that as the trends currently stand, Democrats are becoming more and more dependent on feminist voters who have been the driving force behind many of that party's recent victories. Both of the Democrat governors, Abigail Spanberger in Virginia and Mickey Sherrill in New Jersey, won based off of overwhelming support from women, while receiving far weaker but vital support from men. And young mothers are now being murdered at bus stops in Virginia as a result of liberal women's incorrect assessment of the situation. In fact, Spanberger won the support of 65% of the female voters, meaning, conversely, that 35% of them voted against her. Those would be the unicorns that I mentioned earlier, females who vote Republican. But Spanberger also won 48% of the men, belying the claim that no men are necessary. Sherrill had very similar numbers, carrying 62% of women and receiving support from 49% of men. This trend holds true nationally as well. According to the Public Policy Institute of California, women are substantially more likely to identify with the Democrat Party than men are. And women also vote at higher rates than men do. In the 2024 election, approximately 91.3 million women cast their ballots, compared with only 82.6 million men. So, more than 9 million extra women showed up to vote in that race. And Kamala still lost both the Electoral College and the popular vote. An associate professor of public policy at the University of North Carolina, Rebecca Kreitzer, noted a difference in priorities between the sexes as well, writing, "Women consistently rank healthcare, education, and social safety nets as top priorities, while men more frequently emphasize economic growth, national security, and fiscal responsibility." According to Ms. Kreitzer, this modern-day sex gap first emerged during the 1980 presidential election of the great Ronald Reagan, and it has only steadily widened ever since then, growing from a relatively modest 4 to 6 point difference in the 1980s to roughly triple that at a 12 to 15 point difference in most races by 2020. The effects of the sex gap are unnecessarily amplified by the additional reality that women do participate in elections at higher rates than men do, a fact which men can change at any time. Venting online does not change anything, voting does. If you want to be in control, you have to go to the ballot box. That's the equation. According to the Center for American Women and Politics at Rutgers University, women have registered and voted at higher rates than men in every presidential election since 1980. Given that they still lost despite this fact, the DNC's recent 2024 election autopsy recommended that Democrats deploy male messengers, address economic concerns, and don't assume identity politics will hold male voters of color, end quote. But despite this warning, most of the party seems to share Grisham's girl math thinking. I am woman, hear me roar. The thinking that tells them that women are all that they need, even though this is demonstrably not true. Others, however, are aware of the reality, and as women have become the most reliable voting bloc for the Democrat Party, their strategists are searching for ways to attract men to their cause, seeing this as the key to securing dominance. But if they don't curb the very off-putting violence on their side, it is going to be difficult to attract anyone to switch sides. While debating transgender violence on a college campus earlier this week, a 21-year-old political commentator was attacked and temporarily blinded by a cowardly thug who wore a mask to hide his identity so that he could avoid the consequences of his own actions. The video showed Riley Niney, I may be mispronouncing your name, I apologize if I am, a conservative who regularly debates leftist students, sitting at a table on the campus of the University of California, Santa Cruz, when someone who apparently couldn't make a case for their actual beliefs decided to show up clad in black, wearing dark sunglasses and a mask, while throwing a bucket of black liquid on Riley as bystanders, who also apparently could not make a coherent case for their beliefs, cheered the unprovoked violence. Riley chased his cowardly and, I assume, mute attacker, given that he had to resort to this, who fled the scene in gutless fashion and escaped. But Riley told the Daily Wire that the police are actively investigating this and looking for the person. He said that the black liquid caused blindness in both eyes for 3 hours, and he said that the blindness in his right eye continued for 6 hours. EMTs repeatedly flushed his eyes with saline, and at the ER, his right eye was diagnosed with an abrasion to his cornea, which I know from experience is very painful. According to Riley, the entirely unprovoked attack has resulted in semi-permanent damage to his right eye, and in order to seek help, he had to cut short his debate at UC Santa Cruz, where his table featured signs that stated the simple fact that trans women are men, and the at least statistical reality that many transgenders are violent, which this case only seems to prove, given that Riley said that his attacker was 100% male, around 6 feet tall, and had a modified voice that he believes is a result of hormone therapy, and he sported long hair and feminist earrings. Now, I would just like to point out that I think the sign that says transgenders are violent paints with too broad of a brush. It is true that some of them are, and I don't think that's unsayable to say. Every demographic has its issues. There are smart people and dumb people in every race, in every category, in every whatever. There are successful people and lazy people. There are violent people and peaceful people. There are good people and there are bad people in every single category. I will not hold one category up as being superior to others. I am not a supremacist. So I don't believe that any one group is superior. Statistically, there is a disproportionate amount of violence in the transgender community. But I think it paints with too broad of a brush to have the sign say transgenders are violent, as though that is true of all of them. However, I would point out that if your response to him is not to say what I just said, that paints with too broad of a brush and make the case for why, but your response is to commit violence, you just proved his point. As he said, the irony is that one of the signs said transgenders are violent, and then a transgender attacked me. As I said, if you want to prove him wrong, proving him right is probably not the best strategy. And this is not the first time that Riley has been attacked. Only 6 weeks ago, he interviewed a gay couple with a baby on the street and asked them about the statistics on gay men that have been convicted of molesting the children in their care. Now, I'm not a fan of clickbait stuff like this. Once again, there are bad gay men, and it's not unsayable to point that out. There are bad people in every category, and it should be pointed out everywhere that it's found. I think that doing this is clickbaity. I'm not a fan of it. But once again, proving him right is not really the best approach. One of the men shoved him, and when Riley left, that gay man followed him, punching him in the back of the head, resulting in a concussion. Once again, kind of proving his point about at least this particular gay man not being the kind of person that is actually safe for children to be around. Riley added that the local district attorney played partisan identity politics, ignoring his duty and vows to administer blind justice, and they let the gay man off the hook for the crime of assault, which is wrong. He doesn't get special passes. Assault is assault. I don't care if you're a man or a woman. I don't care if you're black or you're white. I don't care if you're gay or you're straight. You know you've reached equality when no one gives a shit. We're there. That's it for me this week. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, I would ask you to please help me build this podcast into a success by clicking the like and follow buttons, because that is what does the trick in making these things successful, and it doesn't cost anything to do. And I hope you come back again next week. Until then, have a good week, my friends.